a flying menace.
Good Lord.
An alien swarm. A projectile fish threatening our ecosystem.
We have to stop it before they stop us.
It may look harmless,
Oh my gosh!
but it's anything but.
Oh man!
These fish are actually up in your face. This head, solid bone, that's what gets you hurt.
These dangerous foreign species are determined to survive in a hostile takeover. And major American waterways may face total annihilation.
There's no real barrier to stop the fish from here moving into Lake Michigan.
For sportsmen, fishermen, and scientists, it's a race against time to stop an invasive destroyer on a rampage. Man versus explosive river crashers. Hooked. Asian carp invasion. Unwelcome foreign intruders, originally introduced by human hands. Escaped invasive species can turn a native ecosystem into an environmental catastrophe.
Years ago, a fish called the Asian carp was brought to American waters to solve a problem. But the big, hungry, and very prolific fish soon became a major problem itself.
Today, the U.S. faces one of the most alarming aliens ever. It's already here, threatening to decimate one of the Earth's largest waterways, the Mississippi River Basin. And now, these ecosystem invaders are headed towards an even more dangerous territory, the Great Lakes.
Species is rapidly approaching Lake Michigan.
Ravenous, fast breeding. If these alien species colonize the biggest freshwater system in America, they could cause devastation.
Have invaded nearly every waterway. Now they threaten the Great Lakes and its $7 billion industry.
As research teams race against time, one of the 21st century's most frightening environmental questions may be contained in a few samples of water.
And the trouble is we keep pushing the limits and we keep finding carp.
The intruder? A fish with a nasty habit. When threatened, it launches like a flying projectile. Can it be stopped? And where is it headed next?
They've took it over. They're not taking it over, they've took it over.
And that has some experts extremely concerned.
It's America versus Asian carp. September 15th, 1999, 225 kilometers from the Great Lakes, Chillicothe, Illinois. Commercial fisherman Orion Briney heads out on the Illinois River. For over 15 years, Orion's worked these waterways. Expecting buffalo fish and catfish, he pulls up his net, usually brimming with fish. On this day, it's almost empty, but not quite. Orion spots two fish fighting hard against the net, with odd-looking eyes set low on their heads.
What the heck is that? It's awful weird looking. Well, when we caught the first one, we pulled it up. We thought we knew what we had. We thought it was like a big lake trout, or because sometimes your water gets real high, you catch a weird fish or two of some kind. Eyes on the bottom of their head, a little bitty scales on them.
Orion takes one of the mystery fish to a biologist.
What do you think that is? Never seen nothing like it before in my life.
One look, and the scientist knows Orion's catch all too well.
It's carp. It's carp? Asian carp. Asian carp. Sure ugly, aren't they? Oh, nasty.
It's a big-head carp, an unwelcome menace more commonly known as Asian carp, and the first of what may be a thriving colony of ruthless aquatic terminators. Along with its sister species, the silver carp, Orion's big head is considered one of the most dangerous invasive creatures in America. The bad news travels fast.
As soon as biologists learned that these species had escaped from aquaculture ponds and were showing up in the nets of fishermen, red flags went up for every biologist.
In Orion's river, the invading bighead carp is perfectly designed for a hostile takeover. Able to reach as long as 1.5 meters and weigh as much as 45 kilograms. In their native Asia, they're Darwinian superstars, easily adapting to most rivers, lakes, and ponds. And as they move into U.S. rivers and start aggressively feeding on plankton, they devour the food chain from the bottom up. But where in Asia, natural predators kept these carp in check, the United States has no river contenders up to the challenge. It's a formula for disaster.
The Asian carp have a potential of devastating local fish populations because they're eating this food at the most basic level. It's suggested that they can eat anywhere from 40 to 80% of their body weight in a day.
And it gets worse. In addition to a ravenous appetite, the Asian carp's breeding rates are in the stratosphere. While most fish spawn once a year, Asian carp can spawn up to 3 times a year, producing as many as 2 million eggs. Breeding and feeding faster than any other native fish in the river, the Asian carp obliterates the competition.
The bighead and silver carp are a very scary threat because of their ability to invade an area so quickly. They will kick other fish, our native fish, out in a short amount of time.
But how did they get here? The answer is chilling. Like many invasive species, these dangerous intruders were deliberately brought by human hands. 50 years ago, in the 1960s, Midwest commercial fish farmers and water treatment authorities were looking to solve a problem: algae overgrowth. Their solution? Import an Asian fish species known for devouring algae, the grass carp.
Last summer, 1/3 of Robert Harrell's 70-acre lake was filled with water weeds. Harrell stocked the lake with carp, and his weed problems were practically solved in 2 months.
You can tell they have really done quite well. I believe we put 350 in here, and in just a little time, it was all gone.
It worked so well, a decade later, more catfish farmers fighting fishery overgrowth imported 2 other Asian carp species with the same taste for algae, the bighead and the silver carp. But what seemed like an ideal solution was an ecosystem ticking time bomb. Summer 1993. Torrential thunderstorms pound the American Midwest. 50,000 homes are damaged or destroyed. 1,000 levees fail. The end result is devastating, but there's an even more disastrous consequence. The normally disconnected rivers, lakes, and streams of the Mississippi River Basin flood together, forming one giant bathtub. To a then relatively obscure fish, it's the perfect escape. Captive carp find a path to freedom, riding floodwaters into open waterways, spawning fast and furious, swimming further into rivers and tributaries throughout the Midwest.
Brought to America to suck up algae and then escaped and multiplied, earning the nickname river rabbits.
An unnatural disaster had begun. Now, for the man who first found this terrifying alien species in his own backyard, the fish is freshwater public enemy #1. Soon after his first sighting, Orion watches an ecosystem under siege. The bighead are so much larger and stronger than native fish, none of the local fishermen have nets strong enough to hold the invaders.
The first year or two, I just don't want to fish for them. You could come out here and literally see 40 acres of them. There'd be so many you couldn't even run the motor through them. You start running your motor through them, and there'd be red blood behind you. When we went out there, you know, they was tearing them nets up. It wasn't very long after most of your fishermen quit fishing.
And there's more to this menace. With no natural predators in the Illinois River, the bighead multiply at astronomical rates, taking over and dominating the food chain. While alarmed Fish and Wildlife agencies try to strategize comprehensive solutions,
They are big, ugly, and abundant.
a nearby processing plant decides to harvest and sell Asian carp as food. In a desperate attempt to save his own livelihood, Orion modifies his gear to stand up to the aggressive invader.
I had the first nets built, and I was the first one on them.
Orion once harvested buffalo fish and catfish. Post-Asian carp invasion, the fish have all but disappeared. Orion's only solution? Change his business model. Make the alien species his catch. He recruits his stepson Jeremy and 13-year-old grandson Levi. Yet even with a team, Asian carp catching is challenging.
You know, it's just completely different ballgame. You gotta hold more nets, you gotta make bigger nets.
July 9th, 2009, Chillicothe, Illinois. Orion and his two-boat crew head out to capture the invasive carp.
We got fish already.
He reads the water, looking for signs of a pack of bighead below. The goal, net as many of this marauding threat as fast as possible. Orion knows these fish spook easily. They fly into the air at the first sign of noise and commotion, a fight-or-flight stress response that can dangerously injure fishermen. Skittish Asian carp scatter fast. Moving carefully, the boats will have to hit the right spot at the right moment.
You gotta be real aggressive when you see them. I mean, you can't sit here and talk and tell, you know. You gotta get right with it, get around them and get them shut off, or they're gone. You say, well, I thought there was a bunch of fish there. Well, there was. But then they beat you.
Orion picks a spot in the middle of the river.
That's where they're at right here. Get ready.
The boats start dropping over 27,000 meters of net. Spreading out, they make their way towards shore, covering the river's entire width. But now, Orion's crew tries to gather the carp using one of the most primitive fishing techniques on Earth, noise. What the men are about to raise in their nets may be proof of a threat far greater than any fisherman's livelihood. An eco-disaster, a raging river invader breeding out of control. Chillicothe, Illinois, 225 kilometers from the Great Lakes. Fisherman Orion Briney and his team are on the hunt for an invasive Asian carp menace, the bighead. Now, with nets strategically placed across the width of the Illinois River, it's time to raise hell, literally. To herd the fish towards them, the crew stomps and bangs the boat's aluminum hulls. Beneath the waters, the distressed fish pick up the vibrations through organs that run along their sides, called neuromasts. Interpreting the vibrations as a predator on the hunt, fleeing bigheads swim straight for the nets.
They're very smart. Once they hear a noise, they're taking off. I would run back and forth and try to bring them into a big school and herd them down, force them into the net.
Meter by meter, Orion's crew pulls up bursting nets. Now, to get the fish to market, it's a race against the sun's baking heat.
How we doing up here? How many we got left? A fish this size will hurt you. Fish this size will probably put you in the hospital if you was going up the river and break something, you know, or even knock you out of the boat, and then there you are.
That's a dandy.
4 hours and 15 nets later, thousands of invasive bighead Asian carp pack the holds of Orion's boats.
That's less than half the size of that big one.
It's all slimy. Here you go, Levi.
From ship to truck, it's an hour-and-a-half drive to one of the few processing plants with the capacity to handle enormous volumes of Asian carp. Here, the fish are unloaded and weighed.
20,944 big heads, 81 carp. Just right.
Today's catch, over 9,000 kilograms. It's a good harvest for what's become an unexpected family business, doing battle with an alien species.
It's fun going out and just getting to hang out with your grandpa and your uncle. It's just a blast.
Fishing's my favorite thing to do. It's probably the only thing I'll ever do, hopefully, with any luck.
Well, anytime we catch a bunch of fish, it's exciting. You know, they get excited, I get excited.
Some of Orion's catch will be filleted and packed for distribution to overseas markets. There, the fish are consumed as food. But in the U.S., there's a problem. Asian carp flesh is filled with tiny bones. The U.S. market for these bony fish as human food is non-existent. Yet many fear, unless we start eating Asian carp by the truckload, we have no chance of stopping their onslaught. And while commercial fishermen struggle to stay in business, according to biologist Dwayne Chapman, exporting these fish as fast as they can be caught isn't enough. It's hardly making a dent in an invasive disaster threatening a continent.
Orion is just one fisherman, and 20,000 pounds of fish is nothing. I estimate that last year, about 2 million pounds of fish were captured, bighead and silver carp together, for market. And that is not a drop in the bucket.
Many scientists fear the invasive eco-destruction is getting worse by the day. And although in 2007, U.S. Fish and Wildlife made it illegal to import or breed silver carp, bighead and black carp have yet to be federally banned, even as populations continue to grow. July 12, 2009, Havana, Illinois, over 300 kilometers from the Great Lakes, the so-called Asian carp capital. Here, the ongoing carp invasion has created such dense populations, boaters are forced to be vigilant, always on the lookout for a rampaging species just as menacing as the bighead, the silver carp. With their notorious hair-trigger fear response, some compare a silver carp collision to being hit by a bowling ball at several kilometers an hour.
I'm a big guy, I'm about 6'6", but it doesn't, that doesn't make much difference to the carp. They will take you out when you're driving around.
Oh, we got two in the boat.
I've been hit pretty hard a couple times.
As one of the world's top invasive fish experts, Dwayne Chapman is leading the charge in the battle against this leaping aquatic threat.
I've been eating, breathing, sleeping these fish, trying to get under their skin, try to figure out everything I can about them in order to know my enemy.
Hi, Kevin. Come aboard.
Today, as part of a fact-finding mission tracking invading silver carp on the move, Dwayne and fellow biologist Kevin Irons board a specially rigged boat designed for a unique task, electrofishing.
This is our electrofishing boat. We use it for routine surveying of fish. You can go to a spot, you put roughly about 5,000 watts worth of electricity into the water. It'll temporarily stun the fish, where biologists can then dip them up.
Yeah, there's a big mouth.
Electrofishing is one way scientists take sample inventories of all the fish species competing for survival in a river. For every fish they net, they note its species, size, and weight, evaluating the overall health of both natives and invasives. As the team works, they face the silver carp's explosive defense strategy.
Protect yourself.
Fish leaping by the hundreds,
Good Lord.
reaching as high as 3 meters.
And it's just a fright response. Anything that scares them, and they tend to go airborne. And they can jump at speeds of probably at least 20 knots or so.
Although Asian carp have infiltrated rivers from Louisiana to Minnesota, today, Dwayne focuses his investigation here on the Illinois. So close to the Great Lakes, this is a critical front line against an eco-catastrophe. Dwayne wants to know how the invaders are thriving and migrating, His ultimate goal? Zero population.
This is the paddlefish. It's one of the filter feeding fishes that we're trying to protect by controlling the bighead and silver carp. They're really odd-looking prehistoric fish, been around for a long time, and it'd be a real shame to have these guys get hurt by this and by the invading bighead and silver carp. Okay, let's get them back in the water.
Keeping the juice on, the shocker arms release steady electric jolts. The jolts successfully stun the bulk of the Asian carp below. Yet the fastest fish react by taking to the air. Whoa! Soon, the team hits the mother lode.
When you get them coming in, it's all you can do to dodge and get your hands up. You want to protect yourself.
But the biologists have no idea lurking below is concrete evidence of a river apocalypse already in progress. The Illinois River, 317 kilometers from the Great Lakes. Electrofishing biologists Dwayne Chapman and Kevin Irons reach a dense patch of flying invasive silver carp and release paralyzing electric currents.
I got it, Megan.
The day's sampling effort only brings up a fraction of what swims dangerously beneath. In the past, when water levels dipped to extreme lows, electroshocking triggered an Asian carp hurricane.
It's like being inside a popcorn popper. You know, there's just fish everywhere. Only the difference is that the fish can, you know, instead of being little kernels of popcorn, you've got fish that range from 6 inches up to 25 pounds that are flying through the air.
But today, they're about to discover something far more frightening.
556.
Measuring the weight and length of the stunned fish, the biologists note something unusual. Instead of a normal rounded body shape, these silver carp are long and narrow.
And this particular fish, as you can see, it's kind of flat across the top. It kind of reaches the top, a point right there behind the head, and it's kind of flat from there on back. This fish should be rounded.
It's a bad sign. To the scientists' trained eyes, the silver carp are starving. The implications are grave. When it comes to feeding, silver carp are top-notch competitors. They muscle out almost all other species.
Bighead and silver carp are the most highly advanced filter feeding fishes in freshwater in the world. And so it's pretty hard for our native fishes to compete with that.
If top competitor silver carp are starving, native fish species don't stand a chance. It's how an invasive like the Asian carp wreaks havoc, feeding until there's nothing left to feed on, starving out all other species, eventually starving themselves. The only solution is to move on to the next waterway in food supply. Here, it's the beginning of the end of the once vital Illinois River, and the beginning of the end of America's freshwater fisheries. After dedicating much of his career to the Asian carp scourge, Dwayne believes the electrofishing evidence reveals a crisis now reaching a critical mass, a crisis that might have been prevented.
When they hit the Illinois River and Missouri River, the populations just skyrocketed. All of a sudden, we had tons of fish.
In hindsight, we could have and should have prevented their arrival in North America.
The statistics are terrifying. With silver and bighead carp, the most dangerous invasive offenders, Asian carp species currently make up an astonishing 80% of the total upper Mississippi River Basin's biomass, roughly 2,500 fish for every kilometer of river. Populations so enormous, some speculate a total takeover may be impossible to stop.
Carp are right there knocking at the door. So we need to do something soon.
September 10th, 2009. At the Aquatic Center for Conservation at the University of Notre Dame, Professor David Lodge heads an invasive species task force. As an Asian carp Armageddon looms, the task force is fighting back with a cutting-edge tool.
For invasive species in lakes and rivers, one of the big challenges is often just figuring out where the darn organisms are. And it's like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Dr. Lodge and his team have developed a solution for finding the needle in the haystack, locating Asian carp without having to catch a single fish. It's called environmental DNA testing. Just as CSI teams collect DNA samples from criminal evidence, Dr. Lodge's team tests water samples for traces of Asian carp DNA. If they get a positive hit, Asian carp have passed through the test sample's water source. Using this method, the team can test large bodies of water relatively quickly. It's an efficient diagnostic tool that's never been used to fight an invasive aquatic species until now.
The hard work is done back in the laboratory, but that too is relatively quick compared to the effort required to electroshock or net fish in a lake or a river. Yep, so I think that still sounds like what we want to do is start upstream, get the most urgent information first.
Armed with breakthrough genetic detection, Professor Lodge's team heads to what may be the single most dangerous Asian carp frontline, the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. In 1900, to prevent sewage from entering Lake Michigan, contaminating the city's drinking water, the city of Chicago came up with an idea, reversing the direction of the Chicago River. The result? An ingenious feat of engineering called the Sanitary and Ship Canal. Today, the canal is an important route for cargo ships. But when humans connected the Mississippi River basin to Lake Michigan, no one predicted that they were building a disastrous invasive species superhighway.
The Great Lakes have on the order of 186 species that are non-native, many of which are damaging.
And there are dreaded cautionary tales. One exotic species already doing major environmental and economic damage is the zebra mussel. After hitching rides from Europe in the ballasts of cargo ships, these mollusks have quickly multiplied and clogged up industrial pipes. They must be routinely cleaned, exterminated, and monitored.
Zebra mussels caused the shutdown of the Monroe Power Plant in Michigan, which cost millions of dollars.
To many, the ongoing zebra mussel plight is a warning. Similar stories, like the Chinese snakehead fish found in Maryland in 2002, all sound an urgent alarm. In a global economy of international trade and human intervention, far worse invasive scourges are to come.
These things are being transported by the thousands every day on the planet in planes and ships. This is one of the most damaging environmental changes that's been going on since humans started moving species.
Here, 30 miles from the entrance to the Great Lakes, the team picks a strategic spot. It's downstream from the last line of man-made defense, an electric underwater fence. In 2002, authorities installed rows of steel cables across a section of the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. Today, volts of DC current flow from the cables into the water, delivering harmless but critical fish-repelling shocks. When it comes to stopping the northward migration of the invasive Asian carp, this single electric fence may stand between control and catastrophe. But many experts fear the barrier's far from foolproof. Is it truly enough to stop an invader from river domination?
The barrier needs to be turned off every 6 months for a short period of time to rehabilitate it. If you turn off the thing and they're sitting there at the door, they're going to swim through.
Back in the lab, the team submits their samples for DNA tests. What the water reveals is shocking.
The Asian carps were several miles upstream from where people had thought they were. It It was exciting to discover that we learned something important. On the other hand, it was depressing because the problem is so much more acute than we thought previously.
It's confirmed. Carp are less than 11 kilometers from the electric fence barrier.
All that separates the silver carp from the Great Lakes now is one lock and the electric barrier that the Army Corps of Engineers has installed.
What began as a field test now becomes an urgent investigation.
Communities have been even releasing carp.
The next critical test location is the Chicago River. Lindsay Chatterton with the Great Lakes Project heads up the investigation.
So we are in downtown Chicago. This is the last lock through which boats pass to get onto Lake Michigan itself.
Discovering Asian carp DNA here would mean disaster. If there's a positive hit, it's proof the fish have gone further and slipped past the electric barrier.
I think these fish are much further up the system than anyone previously thought, and really we don't know how far up they are.
Targeting backwater pockets where DNA collects, the team fills 2-liter bottles, noting location, depth, and temperature.
There's no real barrier to stop the fish from here moving into Lake Michigan, so we clearly don't want to find them here.
Back at the lab, the clock is ticking on a potential environmental time bomb. The team puts the samples on ice to slow any DNA degradation and begins testing for Asian carp DNA.
I hope and pray that they won't see anything upstream from the barrier.
But while Dr. Lodge's lab team waits for results,
Focus your chi, Tim. Do what? Focus your chi. I think that's some kind of Zen thing, isn't it?
over 160 kilometers away, some anglers are taking a more direct approach.
Let's hit it, brother.
Fighting an invasive killer head on.
All right, guys, here we go.
August 22nd, 2009, 251 kilometers from the Great Lakes, Peoria, Illinois. Zach Naden is a lifelong fisherman and pioneer of an unconventional catch technique, aerial bow fishing.
It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I shot a fish out of the air. I mean, it's so unorthodox. Ah! These fish are actually up in your face, and you know, it's like a combative sport.
Take that. I think I got Big Louie hooked.
Both Zach and fellow bow fisher Tim Wells are avid outdoorsmen. Though to some their technique is highly controversial. When projectile silver carp swarmed their river, conventional rod and reels were useless. These invasive fish are filter feeders who do not take hooked bait. So the anglers decided to up the ante.
We came up with these specifically for shooting these fish. Nobody really had any equipment for shooting them out of the air. As you can see, it's small, it's compact, it's about 3.5 pounds, carbonero. And this reel here, it's got all the line here in the bottle.
Come on, boys, say cheese.
Zach and Tim scour the river for pockets of aerial intruders.
I smell blood in the water, brother.
Let's get it, man, let's get it.
Fish on! Cheer up, cheer up, cheer up. Oh!
But against carp hordes hurtling out of the water, even seasoned fishermen risk wrecking their equipment.
Oh, that didn't take long.
Look, she's still spinning. Oh, man. Doggone it.
Or suffering a knockout blow.
The coolest part about this kind of bow fishing is coming home alive and with all your teeth.
Oh, my God. Ah!
Suddenly, the archers reach a bursting pack of silver carp.
Oh, keep it going, Chase, in a circle. Oh. Circle the thing, Chase. Oh, my God. Ah! Oh, man. Oh! Holy, this is Godzilla. Holy. Oh.
Fish on, fish on, fish on!
Peoria, Illinois, 251 kilometers from the Great Lakes. Bow fishermen Zach Naden and Tim Wells have arrows at the ready, hunting invasive carp across the Illinois River.
Fish on, fish on!
Now they're facing a high-energy upheaval known as popcorning.
Oh my God! Oh, man! The popcorn is just, it's a feeling of total loss of control. Oh my God! You have no idea what's coming next, whether you're gonna make it out, where you're gonna get hit. It's, you just gotta kind of grit your teeth and bear it. That's what we're looking for there, folks. That's, whoa! Slow us down, Chase, slow us down.
Zach fires his bow.
Fish on, fish
A direct
fish
hit.
on. Boom shakalaka.
Reeling in the line, Zach heaves his catch on board. It's a monster.
Man, now that's a fish. That's a giant. Wow. That's one of the bigger ones we've taken this year.
Dude, that's about the biggest as they get, man. That's, you're
Wow.
right at the record right there.
We've got a giant Asian silver carp.
Hold him out here in the sun. He's over 25.
He's over 25 pounds easy. Easy. He's probably about 34, 35 inches long. Just solid muscle. His head, solid bone. Solid bone. That's what gets you hurt when they jump in. That's what you feel when these fish hit you.
It's just one fish, but it's also just the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
Zach and Tim routinely land 100 carp in a single afternoon.
Fish on! Oh!
Though some may find their methods brutal, and it's no solution to a massive problem. To the sportsman, it's a direct way to kill at least a few specimens of an environmental menace, threatening an entire ecosystem, one fish at a time.
I got him, boy. Come on in here. 9 out of every 10 fish right now is an Asian carp. So that's the problem we're facing right now. Oh my God!
September 11th, 2009, back at South Bend, Indiana's University of Notre Dame. Scientists know all too well it will take far more extreme measures to end the Asian carp blight. Using their unique forensics DNA testing, Dr. David Lodge and his Invasive Species Task Force await the results of the latest water sample. It's devastating news. Some of the samples test positive for Asian carp DNA. Asian carp have breached the electronic barrier.
The trouble with the work we've been doing is we keep pushing the limits and we keep finding carp.
But identifying traces of DNA just past the barrier doesn't yet prove a critical mass of fish have infiltrated Lake Michigan. Further evidence is needed. Facing this nightmare scenario, Dr. Lodge's team heads out to find answers to this alarming and now pressing question. Are they arriving at an ecological crime scene too late? Are the fish already colonizing Lake Michigan? University of Notre Dame researcher Chris Jurdy leads the sampling effort on Lake Michigan.
A carp positive out here would cause a lot of concern because this is the whole point, is to prevent them from getting into Lake Michigan.
I think it would be a big surprise and a terrible thing if they were able to get any DNA in Lake Michigan.
If the team gets a positive hit in Lake Michigan, it reveals a breach of the most disturbing threshold yet, a gateway to the entire Great Lakes, the largest freshwater ecosystem on Earth. Yet as an eco-catastrophe hangs in the balance, anglers from all over the country flock to the Illinois River to take up a fight they take personally. Here, on the banks of a river under siege, the battle lines are drawn, and the war rages in a competition called the Redneck Tournament.
It's just unbelievable what these fish have done. You could go out boat riding. We took the kids out, went tubing down the river. They've taken all that away from us.
If they hit the Great Lakes and start destroying that the same way that they have destroyed life in the Illinois River, we don't have a chance. We have to stop it before they stop us.
The goal of the tournament is to catch as many airborne carp as possible. Determined, these anglers risk life, limb, and teeth. Rival teams adopt playful names, but their cause is serious. Here, bow fishermen Zach and Tim compete as the maggot eaters. And though the impact on the Asian carp scourge may be insignificant, for them and others, it's a way to raise awareness and take personal action.
Well, we got to do our part for conservation, you know. Everything else is dying because of these fish, so we like to try to get as many out of the river as we can.
Are we ready? Don't hang legs over the side.
Now, lined up on shore, the teams wait for the start.
There we go!
As the countdown begins for one of the world's most original, if controversial, fishing contests, people arm themselves with baseball bats and nerve against a fish that seems to rain upwards into the sky. A vision fit for a biblical plague.
They just fly at you and you really don't know when they're gonna hit you in the face or in the shoulder or come in your boat and bleed everywhere.
$106. 106. Dude, that's double.
This year, the bow-wielding maggot eaters are determined not to go down without a fight.
We got second last year. We're trying to improve.
106 fish.
You gotta be kidding me.
The maggot eaters tie with Team Showtime.
106.
Are you serious?
This year's bragging rights will have to be shared.
Hey, wait, I didn't go check the boat. There might be one more in the battery.
In the spirit of victory, it's easy to forget the environmental stakes. In total, competitors typically net over 1,500 carp in a matter of hours. Proof these alien fish are multiplying, destroying the river. But using the competition's haul, two men are determined to make a difference. By day, Dr. John Holden and Dr. Tim Leeds work as reproductive specialists. By night, they've invented a massive food processor capable of transforming carp into a crop.
This becomes this. This we sell. 1,200 pounds of fish will turn into about 400 pounds of fish meal.
The fish are ground up and flash dried, generating almost zero waste. The Heartland processor then converts the tournament haul into two byproducts, oil and powder. The oil is low mercury and rich in omega-3 fatty acids, perfect for nutritional supplements. The powder is a high-protein fish meal, perfect for making commercial fish farm feed pellets.
People consider it a junk fish, so no one wants to fish it, no one wants to eat it. Well, with our machine, we just grind up the bones. That's a source of calcium.
The end product is 14% oil, 5% water, and the remainder is protein.
The processor can handle roughly 2 metric tons of fish an hour, and it's mobile. The doctors hope someday to put it right below the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal's electric barrier. From there, they envision moving downriver, harvesting tons of Asian carp as they go.
Using that model, we can get 800 million pounds of carp out over 5 years.
But is the Heartland processor enough to keep a spreading scourge from destroying an American ecosystem? The answer may depend on whether it's too late to stop the Asian carp and where the invasive fish are headed next. On the eve of a disaster, as the Asian carp threatens to invade the U.S. Great Lakes, ironically, in the fish's native China, near Shanghai, overfishing in dams are pushing bighead and silver carp to extinction. To compensate, billions of Asian carp are now farm-raised.
These species constitute about 80% of all farmed freshwater fish production in China. These fish are the staple of the population of China.
In Chinese markets, Asian carp are a valued delicacy, kept alive as long as possible.
When the heart stops beating, it brings a lower price. It's because it's so important in China to keep fish fresh.
fresh carp is made into a traditional fish head soup. But stateside, despite urgent headlines of the Asian carp menace, the problem of American tastes persists. Few people here are willing to eat the bony fish, yet the cost of exporting live carp to China is prohibitively expensive, and efforts to bring the carp into contained U.S. fish farms have only ended in disaster. So disastrous, biologist Dwayne Chapman argues Asian carp escaped into the American wild almost as soon as they arrived, long before the infamous Midwestern flood breaches of the 1990s.
We had well-established populations of bighead silver carp and grass carp in the wild long before those floods. There were very likely many, many escapes because people weren't being very careful. It was a general feeling that these fish were not like our fish. The rivers that they were established in China were not like our rivers, and that we had all these big predators that would eat them up were they to escape, and all of that turned out to be hogwash, frankly.
It's another chilling cautionary tale against human intervention in nature. Today, Dwayne and others continue to fight on the ever-expanding front lines. But some predict, unless and until U.S. demand for Asian carp increases, keeping up with their breakneck spawning will be impossible. The carp population will continue to grow exponentially, invading new turf each day. Ultimately, we may be forced into a far more macabre solution. Some authorities are convinced no strategy is complete without a deadly plan of attack.
They're devastating the ecology.
Poison.
Poisons like rotenone have been used very effectively in many parts of the world to eradicate populations of unwanted fishes. But you must have a high willingness to accept losses of many other species. We do know how to kill Asian carps. We don't know how to kill them without killing lots of other things.
To date, poison has been used in limited quantities near the electric fence barrier. But as the clock on these spreading carp is ticking, far more aggressive and deadly measures may be all we have left. And now, one of the 21st century's most frightening environmental questions is contained in a few samples of water. Have the tenacious alien fish made it into the $7 billion fishery and ecosystem of Lake Michigan on their way to the Great Lakes?
We have never hoped for negative results more in our life, because it would say that we haven't detected anything this high up.
The results are in. Some samples taken from Lake Michigan test positive for Asian carp DNA. Asian carp have breached the electronic barrier and reached Lake Michigan. As alarms sound across the country, it's just the beginning. If Asian carp spawn reaching a critical mass in the Great Lakes, the effects will be catastrophic. If history is any indicator, it would be an ecosystem nightmare. Asian carp devour all plankton, leaving native fish like bass and walleye to starve. In addition, they digest only half the plant matter they eat, excreting waste that can cause a polluting scourge called algae blooms, clogging the water, killing fish, and destroying human drinking water. A $7 billion fishery could swiftly face decimation. And in time, the fish could move on to their next freshwater target.
You've got to care about what's happening to your grandkids' resources as well. And we sure don't want to see anything like that. The Asian carp population explosion in the Great Lakes. It would be a disaster.
It's a vision of invasive species hell. Those trying to stop it share an urgent goal: fight Asian carp by any means necessary. An invasive assault, already threatening to bring the Mississippi River Basin to the brink of eco-destruction. Now, the Great Lakes face the same deadly fate. But scientists and fishermen refuse to back down, doing whatever it takes to end the Asian carp invasion.